Hi there. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Ryan Nobles on a chaotic day here in Washington after a White House memo announced an abrupt freeze on federal grants, creating panic and confusion in state houses, nonprofits, some welfare programs and universities, while also sparking concerns that the president was violating the law. In a two-page memo issued late yesterday, the Office of Management and Budget ordered all federal agencies to, quote, temporarily pause all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance effective at 5 o'clock today. It noted some exceptions like Social Security and Medicare, but it was vague about a litany of other government programs, including Medicaid. Amid the scramble for clarity, NBC News obtained an 836-page spreadsheet sent by the White House to federal agencies asking for details about the financial assistance that they provide for a wide variety of programs and welfare benefits. It included SNAP, commonly referred to as food stamps, as well as federal Pell Grant programs, subsidized school breakfast and lunch programs, and the Supplemental Nutritional Program for women, infants, and children. Now, initial indications were that this could be a massive and disruptive freeze, potentially affecting trillions of dollars in spending that had been legally appropriated by Congress. But this afternoon, the White House tried to clarify. In her first White House press briefing, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt citing a new memo from the Office of Management and Budget that said this is not an across-the-board freeze on federal financial assistance and that it applies to a significantly more narrow scope of government aid and presidential priorities.
Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, welfare benefits, assistance that is going directly to individuals will not be impacted by this pause. So what does this pause mean? It means no more funding for illegal DEI programs. It means no more funding for the Green New scam that has cost American taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. It means no more funding for transgenderism and wokeness across our federal bureaucracy and agencies. No more funding for Green New Deal social engineering policies. Again, people who are receiving individual assistance, you will continue to receive that.
Now, the White House then provided NBC News with a new OMB memo emphasizing that any program that provides direct benefits to Americans is explicitly excluded from the pause and exempted from this review process. Now, according to the memo, that includes not only Social Security and Medicare, but also Medicaid, SNAP, and student loan benefits. But to be sure, there are still many questions about the actual scope of this move and how much authority the president actually has when it comes to freezing federal spending. The move has already sparked a series of lawsuits from states, from nonprofit organizations, and from small businesses. While on Capitol Hill, Senate Democrats are calling on Budget Committee Chair Lindsey Graham to hold off on advancing Russell Vaught's nomination to be the OMB director until the White House rescinds the freeze. Democrats also call this an illegal power grab by the president.
This is cruelty. This is lawlessness. This is a heist done on a national scale. No matter how much he may believe he does, the president does not have the authority to ignore the law, and we're going to fight this in every way that we can.
This is an attempt by Donald Trump to seize power. That sounds like a provocative thing to say, but how else do you describe what we have watched happen over the last week?
As much as Trump desires it, the president is not a king. As much as Trump desires it, a law is not a suggestion.
Senate Republicans, though, echoed the White House's tone, emphasizing what they say is a need to review where federal dollars are going.
Do you really honestly believe that President Trump is going to take away the free lunches of kids? There's no way. There's no possibility in everything. At the end of the day, though, he's got to freeze everything in order to get his arms around it. Just give him a little time.
He's not halting, he's reviewing it, and in a certain amount of time, he's going to release it again. That's what he ran on. He ran on looking at everything he possibly could to evaluate where the money's going, is it going to the right place, and he's right on target.
Well, I think it's a review time. My understanding of the order is to review it. I think the Biden administration, not in addition to burrowing people in the administrative state, also was rushing money out the door. So my guess is they're trying to make sure that it's compliant with the laws that Congress did pass.
And I think he's going to do a short-term, I guess through February 10th, he's going to do a short-term run through the programs to make sure we're not wasting money and they're following the law.
Joining me now is Kelly O'Donnell at the White House, and Sahil Kapoor is on Capitol Hill. So, Kelly, what happens less than an hour from now at 5 p.m. Eastern Time?
Well, that is the starting point of telling all of these agencies that are affected to freeze the disbursement of funds. And they have until February 10th to provide the Trump administration with specific answers about justifying the spending attached to their programs. Now, the reaction that you outlined in the opening here is as stark as the differing views from the Trump side, and those allies, Republicans in Congress and the Senate, are saying that this is exactly what the president said he would do, while others are pointing out that it has created real concern about the everyday impact on programs across all kinds of agencies. The White House was quick to say that individuals who would receive specific benefits would not see those impeded. But at the same time, we still have questions about what happens to the various programs. There are reports of different kinds of social services not having access to their websites and that kind of thing. So at a minimum, it's raising lots of questions. There's a period for justifying these programs. And a governor that I spoke to today said everyone needs to remain calm and that this only would apply if programs are in that category that Donald Trump has outlined of being related to DEI, wokeness, all those politically potent terms that have been used. At the same time, there are lawmakers who say the budgeting was done, the lawful process was done, and whether the Trump administration views it as fine print or not, it is the law. So at a minimum, it is creating this kind of confusion, asking lots of questions, seeking clarification. You've got different agencies, groups, nonprofits, governors' offices around the country trying to respond and react to put people's minds at ease where that is appropriate and to push for more answers and questions to be pursued on what does this mean, and if there are programs that are put into this freeze, will they come back? So a lot more to do here, and certainly this is happening before there's even a director of the Office of Management and Budget confirmed by the Senate. It's happening through the acting. So 1 week and a day into the administration taking this kind of disruptive action, which may be true to the Trump brand, but has also got a set of cascading effects. Ryan?
You know, Kelly, and you read that memo, the initial memo, and it seems almost purposefully confusing. I mean, was the chaos a part of the plan by the administration to see how far they could push this?
It's hard to know exactly what the intention, but clearly President Trump has a very expansive view of presidential power, and that comes right up against the bureaucracy of the government and the co-equal branch over on Capitol Hill of legislators. So there is certainly an attempt to hit the ground running, do a lot of imprinting the Trump point of view on the federal government. Where that goes in terms of legal action, how these programs and different kinds of spending would be reviewed and how they would go forward, all of that remains to be seen. But clearly President Trump and his team are trying to say that they are changing the way government does business. Whether they can do that lawfully or not is an open question.
Okay, Kelly, thank you for that. Let's move down Pennsylvania Avenue and talk to Sahil Kapoor about this to see if these members of Congress have any interest in asserting their authority as a co-equal branch of government. Sahil, let's talk first about the Republicans. Did they seem to be caught off guard by the news of this freeze?
Yes, they were caught off guard, Ryan. The White House didn't exactly pave the ground here, so this was a bit of a crash landing from the OMB. And they're trying to react in real time as the White House and the OMB themselves adjust their language. There's been a significant turnaround here where just yesterday in that memo that we reported last night, they used language that the freeze was including but not limited to the specific things that Trump and the White House outlined, like the Green New Deal, which isn't a law, by the way, woke policies, DEI, transgender. Today in a new memo, they say the funding is expressly limited to those policies. So that's very different. Maybe that would be a little bit of clarity that the federal agencies can use and that Republicans might be a little bit more comfortable with. A number of them were skeptical, but you played how several of them reacted. Trump is very much in his his honeymoon phase, and Republicans are, for the most part, supporting him. Democrats, on the other hand, are in a very, very different space. I think Democrats are right now more comfortable in their political element than I've seen in a long time, Ryan. This is their bread and butter, attacking Republicans for trying to cut these programs for working class and middle class Americans, programs that voters often don't really appreciate until somebody here on Capitol Hill or in the White House tries to mess with them. And you saw kind of Democrats in unison with this economic message that they're trying to put forward. On a day like this, President Trump made that quite easy for them.
Right, and also suggesting that he's laying the groundwork to use this money to pay for tax cuts for very wealthy individuals as they go through this budget process a little bit further. But let's talk about, we talk often about how, by and large, Republicans have kind of stood in line behind the Trump agenda early on into this administration. But there are still 3, 4, maybe 5 Republicans in the Senate in particular that might be willing to stand up to him. That's likely what sank Matt Gaetz' nomination. It almost sank the nomination of Pete Hegseth. Now we have Russell Vought, who is on deck to be confirmed as the next OMB director. It seems as though the timing of this is pretty suspicious, that he would do this before Vought was confirmed. Could this impact his confirmation? Could there be Republicans that are angry about this, that are appropriators, that worked on these bills and appropriated these funds, that may say, hey, you're overextending yourself here?
Well, at the very least, it shows a bit of bravado from the White House that they don't think Republicans would meaningfully push back. And honestly, we have not seen a lot of meaningful pushback. We've seen some from someone like Senator Susan Collins, the last Republican representing a blue state in the Senate, who said the order is far too sweeping. Over in Doral, our team spoke to Congressman Don Bacon, who represents a rare swing district won by Kamala Harris in the 2024 election, a rare Republican representing a swing district like that, who said he did not agree with this order. But for the most part, Republicans are sticking with Trump. Senator John Thune, the majority leader, had some interesting comments. He used the word clarify and clarity many, many times in that press conference that you and I recently attended here on Capitol Hill. He indicated that it's not necessarily abnormal for an administration to try to review and pause when they come in, but that he does want more clarity. Now, with regard to Vought, the Democrats did call on Senator Lindsey Graham, the budget chairman, to delay this, advancing this nomination, but we got a statement, a pretty snippy and firm statement from Graham's office saying that's not going to happen. They're going to move forward as early as this Thursday, Ryan. Okay, we'll have to see how that plays out. Sahil Kapoor, thank you for that. Let's now bring in Robert Tsai, who's the professor of constitutional law at Boston University. He's going to clear all of this up for us. Professor, as we know, constitutionally, Congress holds the power of the purse. So legally, what authority does the president have here to freeze federal funds?
Well, President Trump's going to immediately run into two sources of legal difficulty. The first is actually federal law. There's a law called the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, which specifies a sort of protocol by which a president could refuse to expend certain monies that had been appropriated, but they have to give reasons and they have to give Congress an opportunity to decide whether that will be okay. From what we can tell, that has not been complied with. The second thing is what you've mentioned is the constitutional difficulties that a sweeping order like this will run into. The Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse as well as the power to make law. And you've got the problem here, which is that the president's order is so broad, his theory apparently is so broad, that it could potentially be usurping Congress's not only the power of the purse, but also that he could be violating his own constitutional obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. So I expect those will be the gist of the legal arguments that will be made.
So every time I have these conversations about Trump and his efforts to exert executive authority, I come back to this point every single time. Yes, this might be adjudicated in a courtroom. There'll be a fight about it legally. But ultimately, who has the power to stop him? I guess it would be a court. But it seems as though Trump is willing to push and the limits and the bounds of his authority as far as he can take it. Right now, is it only a court that could stop him from implementing a policy like this?
I think the quickest answer would be a TRO from a court. We've seen that happen in the past, so there are legal precedents in place. When President Nixon refused to disperse monies that had been appropriated to help clean up pollution in sewers, local sewers, and waterways. They got a court order, and that was endorsed by the Supreme Court of the United States. So we've had cases like this come up before, and it could be a very sort of quick proceeding that leads to a judicial order. Certainly, Congress, if it could get its act together, could try to also assert its role. But it's going to be hard, given the polarization that we see, as well as the early days of the Trump administration, that his own party is going to give him much of the benefit of the doubt, I think, there.
Yeah, it seems as that way. It looks as though it's probably going to be up to the courts in these early days of this administration, and it could set the stage for what we see for the remainder of those 4 years. Robert Tsai, thank you for your expertise. We appreciate it. I want to now bring in the former Republican governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, who was responsible for doling out federal funds to programs when he held that office in North Carolina. Governor, so many states rely on these federal grants as part of their total revenue. And there's probably a lot of your former constituents that were getting federal funds that didn't even realize they were getting federal funds because they came from the government of North Carolina. I mean, how disruptive and chaotic was the rollout of this new memo? And what are the implications for governors that hold the seat that you used to hold?
Well, I got a feeling that someone in OMB got over their skis and released something so broadly that it can be interpreted in any way when the White House is now giving a much more narrow definition. What amazes me about all of this is there's shock and dismay about executive authority when this has been escalating since the Obama administration, and Trump did it, then Biden did it with student loans, and now Schumer's expressing dismay when, in fact, the last four presidents, I think, have exceeded their executive power based upon the Constitution. This is another example that may have to go to the courts, but I got a feeling the White House is narrowing this down very, very quickly. And for governors and mayors, I was a mayor for 14 years too, I would be right now most concerned, at least after the last 8 hours, about some capital projects that I have grants in, because you have all these contracts out there on capital projects. It can be multi-billion-dollar projects that you have federal money waiting on, that now all of a sudden the creditors and the loans, you're going, wait a minute, could this project be canceled? It could be water and sewer, it could be mass transit, it could be roads. I know everyone's talking about Medicare and things of that nature and food stamps. I don't think they're going to touch that. My concern would be the long-term uncertainty of capital projects, which there are tons of grants out there. And by the way, that also includes educational research grants, too.
Yeah, expand on that, because under the banner of what he's described as getting rid of Green New Deal policies, many of these infrastructure projects were kind of packaged under this idea of improving the environment and dealing with energy and resource allocation issues. Yeah. Is that one of the reasons that you're so concerned that those infrastructure projects could be in danger?
I'd be worried if I had a major road project or transit project, in which, you've already signed the contracts dependent upon the funding of federal money. Boy, you're talking about major disruption unless you get some immediate word back. I got a feeling, my guess would be that the Trump administration is trying to go after some of the things in the Inflation Act that they call part of the Green New Deal, but it was in the Inflation Act, which the Trump administration strongly disagrees with. I got a feeling this was a way to maybe stop some of the contracts that the Biden administration was trying to speed up the expenditures in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So this is a lot of gamesmanship. Yeah. But frankly, there's been a lot of gamesmanship lately with executive orders in the past decade that, even with the student loan program, they ruled against it, and Biden did it again. Right. So it's putting the courts in a very, very difficult position on both the left and the right. It's almost like, my gosh, there's gambling in Casablanca. Well, everyone's doing it and then expressing outrage and shock.
Well, let's talk about that, because is this an issue for the lawmakers on Capitol Hill? And I agree with you. The move to expand executive power didn't start with the Trump administration. Maybe Donald Trump is pushing it to the limits. But is that really the fault of lawmakers on Capitol Hill basically abdicating their responsibilities? Do they need to kind of step up here and exert their authority as a co-equal branch of government?
Absolutely. In fact, some of this is their fault because they don't want to get into specifics about what to cut in major bills, or they don't want to get specifics in their bills. And the language is so general for fear of retribution that they're almost helping the bureaucracy, and the executive branch will make the decisions for them. It's a safe way to do it. And there's no safe way anymore with a multi-trillion-dollar budget deficit. So everyone's confronting it in one way and running from it in another, and both the Democrats and the Republicans are quite hypocritical at this point in time. But this is a short-term mistake, probably down in the bureaucracy before the OMB directors even approved, that probably slipped through with not enough eyes on it. That could be interpreted as far as taking away someone's day-to-day needs, which looked like it was quickly corrected or attempted to be corrected. So that's why I'm right now, as a mayor or governor, I'd be more worried about the uncertainty of capital programs.
Right. Well, Governor, when this came down, I said, I know a guy that can talk to us about this, that's been there before and would have some answers, and you delivered, sir. I appreciate that.
It's a game being played by all branches of government, and the courts, the third branch of government, might need to be the one who really needs to give clarity on this sooner or later. And the other two branches are going to have to listen to him.
Yep. Okay. Governor McCrory, thank you so much for being here, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Coming up, the power of the purge. I'll talk to the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee after he rebuked President Trump's firing of more than a dozen independent government watchdogs. Plus, West Virginia's new Republican Senator Jim Justice meets the press. NBC's exclusive interview with the former governor, including his reaction to Trump's consequential first days in office. That's all straight ahead. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. With uncertainty and confusion about this Trump administration memo on federal spending, let's bring in one of the top oversight voices on Capitol Hill. Joining me now is Virginia Democratic Congressman Gerry Connolly. He is the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. So, Congressman, let's first start with this confusion that is playing out after seeing this OMB order. To your knowledge, what programs will be impacted? And for the many individuals in your district that work directly with funds from the federal government, I'm sure you're being inundated with phone calls. What are you telling them right now?
Well, because of the lack of clarity and specificity, a lot of people are assuming that their programs are shut down, that they can't go forward with contracts, with grants, with loans. And as a result, as your previous speaker just said, former governor of North Carolina, that can affect capital programs, transportation projects, construction projects, investment in new chips manufacturing projects. It affects nonprofits. It affects state and local government programs like community development block grants for mental illness, for SNAP, for childcare, you name it. Everything is affected by the federal dollar and the federal investment. And so I think they've unleashed chaos because they're sloppy and because their goal, which is to refashion the federal government, is neither realistic nor desirable.
I want to put up some of your statement on Trump's recent moves. And this is what you said: freezing federal grants and loans that Congress approved, firing IGs without cause or legally required congressional notice, and implementing Schedule F is Project 2025. It is executive branch overreach, and it is unconstitutional. So I've heard this word over and over again today on Capitol Hill: overreach, unconstitutional, also illegal, a lot from many of your Democratic colleagues. But I think there are many people watching at home who have, they don't want the legalese answer or the political answer. They want to know, what can you do about it? If you think this is unconstitutional, what power do you have as a member of Congress to stop this?
Well, we can enter into litigation. We can mobilize the public. We can use the bully pulpit. We're in a reactive mode. We're in the minority. The American people decided to give a trifecta to the Republican Party, and this is the consequence of that. But that doesn't mean we're powerless, and it doesn't mean we're moribund or supine, and we're not going to be. We're going to be very outspoken. We're going to look at situations like this where they have overreached, and we're going to strike back. And that's what we're doing. I'm doing it right now on your program.
Mm-hmm. Are you worried that the legal process could take too long? I mean, how does that impact this decision-making process in your efforts to push back?
I am worried about that because the legal alternative can sometimes be arduous and take forever. We saw that, for example, in the prosecution of Donald J. Trump himself, right? It took too long, and justice was thus avoided and denied. But in this particular case, we have prior judicial rulings. For example, take impoundment. That is to say, an executive, the president, decides not to spend money duly appropriated lawfully by the Congress. The Supreme Court has already ruled that's unconstitutional. And Congress subsequently even passed legislation making it clear that no such power can be derived from the executive branch in the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. So we've got precedent, and that ought not to take long for a court to decide you don't have that power. You don't have the power to freeze money duly appropriated by the Congress intended to be invested by that Congress in our communities.
So let's talk about how your governor is reacting in Virginia. Glenn Youngkin, who is, of course, a supporter of Donald Trump, he is a Republican. He's calling the way your colleagues have reacted to this a partisan stunt. He said it's a partisan stunt to disseminate knowingly misleading information. He said it's dangerous, fear-mongering, and completely wrong. President Trump is doing what an executive should do at the beginning of his term, which is to find out where the money is, and where it is going. Is there any value in Donald Trump taking a look at how money is being spent and making sure that it's being spent appropriately?
Yeah, if that's what he was doing, but that's not what he's doing, is it? He's using, a bulldozer to get at apparently a narrow concern he's got in terms of the Green New Deal projects. Well, you're going to stop food stamp projects. You're going to stop mental, health investments. You're going to stop capital improvements for states and localities. I don't think that's at all a partisan reaction. I think you heard the Republican governor, former governor of North Carolina, tell you that he thought this was a misstep by the Trump administration. I agree with him rather than the current governor of Virginia.
So you are out with a letter this morning alongside Jamie Raskin, who's the ranking member on Judiciary, former Oversight ranking member and chair, about Trump's firing and reassignments of individuals inside the Justice Department over the weekend. That seems like that was a month ago because everything has happened so fast in this new administration. Do you feel that you and your Democratic colleagues are kind of a step behind reacting to this news because it is happening so fast? Do you feel like you need to speed up the way that you're handling your response and your opposition to the Trump administration?
No, I think we're pretty much on top of this. But I think implicit in your question is there's something we could do that we're not doing. And if you got ideas, I'm all for it. But, we are in the minority. We're in a reactive mode. We're using the tools we've got. But the American people are going to see the consequences of providing a trifecta, Republican control of the Congress and the executive, and what that means in their daily lives. And it's not good. Yeah. And that's why having a check and a balance in our form of government was originated by the founders. And it's a necessary ingredient in making sure that power is corrected and power is limited.
All right, let me put that question a different way. Do you think that perhaps the Trump administration is doing this by design, throwing all these things at you at once so that it's difficult for you to respond and deal with them all?
Absolutely. I think it's the, flood the zone kind of strategy. But in the dysfunctionality of the Trump White House, which I think, can count on again, will be an opportunity for Democrats because they're going to stumble. I think they stumbled today. I think a freeze on all grants and loans and contracts is disastrous and affects every aspect of American life. And that brings it home to the average family in America. Hey, I didn't vote for this.
Okay. Congressman Gerry Connolly of Virginia, thank you so much for your time, sir. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thank you.
Up next, cities across America step up immigration enforcement with new arrests reported in New York today after federal agents made more than 1,000 arrests yesterday alone. We'll have the very latest developments. You're watching Meet the Press now.
president has said countless times on the campaign trail, I've been with him at the rallies, I know you've been there covering them too, Peter, that he is focused on launching the largest mass deportation operation in American history of illegal criminals. And if you are an individual, a foreign national, who illegally enters the United States of America, you are, by definition, a criminal. And so therefore, you are subject to deportation.
Can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws, and therefore they are criminals.
Welcome back. That was the White House press secretary as the Trump administration continues to aggressively pursue its immigration enforcement efforts. It comes as ICE says it made close to 1,200 arrests on Sunday, the largest single-day arrest to date in the Trump administration, in addition to more than 900 arrests that were made yesterday. Joining me now is NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. And Julia, you have new reporting on immigration operations planned for this week. What can you tell us, and how are the cities and states reacting?
Yeah, so we understand that the way ICE wants to go about this is they have these all-hands-on-deck operations where they bring in not just ICE agents, but agents across the federal government, FBI, DEA, et cetera. And they're going to pick 3 cities per week. This week, you just mentioned Chicago and New York. And we understand Aurora, Colorado is next, and that will be Thursday. That's according to the planning right now. Of course, they can change things, but that's what it looks like they're targeting next. And then they'll pick 3 more cities the following week. It doesn't mean arrests don't happen elsewhere. Of course, we're hearing about arrests throughout the country, and ICE agents have been given a quota. They're supposed to get between 1,200 and 1,500 arrests per day. But it means that in those cities, that's where we're going to see a lot of the action. That's places where DHS Secretary Noem is going to fly, like she did today in New York. That's where they're really going to be amplifying that. And they're picking Aurora in large part because that was such a target of Trump during his campaign.
And the White House press secretary said today that the administration now considering anyone who entered the U.S. illegally as a criminal. Is that a shift in their policy, or is that just rhetoric that she's using to now describe what's actually happening?
Well, partly that deserves a fact check, because she says all of these people who they're arresting entered the United States illegally. And that's not true. We saw in a memo just last week that they're going to rescind legal protection for people who applied to come to the United States under Biden-era programs. And so they are now going to make those people illegal, even though they entered legally, providing all of their information and being approved. As far as treating everyone like a criminal, the way even Tom Homan, the border czar, has definitely delineated is that there are people whose only crime was to cross the border illegally, which is a misdemeanor. That is a crime, but that they're very different from people who have committed felonies, like either returning after you're deported or, committing murder, drug trafficking, et cetera, and that those really seem to be the focus. But I think what's happening here is they're finding that it's a lot harder to go arrest those people. Even though they may have a list of who might be targets in certain cities, they're really only able to arrest a handful because it takes about 10 agents to arrest one person who's considered a high threat.
Right, and then they might get into a situation where their target is someone who's committed a crime, and then someone who's just there illegally
Exactly.
is there.
And we expected that, these collateral arrests, you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I think what we're hearing more and more of, and especially what Gabe Gutierrez got last night, that over half are non-criminals, is it looks like they're actually going into places, workplaces, for example, and arresting people when they don't actually believe there's someone in there who poses a threat to public safety.
Okay, Julia Ainsley, thank you for that reporting. We appreciate it. After the break, West Virginia Senator Jim Justice sits down with NBC News hours after President Trump's administration announced a freeze on certain federal grants, a move that could potentially have major consequences for Republican-led states. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As we've said, President Trump's abrupt decision to pause federal aid created widespread confusion and concern. Initially, it seemed like states like West Virginia, which is heavily reliant on government loans and grants, could be significantly impacted. According to a report from Pew, federal grants accounted for over 45% of West Virginia's revenue in 2022. That's well above the nationwide average for the year. But even before the White House clarified some of what was and what was not going to be included in the freeze, West Virginia's new Senator Jim Justice told NBC's Julie Tsirkin in an exclusive interview that he supports a broad freezing of funds for federal programs. Take a look.
At the end of the day, though, he's got to freeze everything in order to get his arms around it. Just give him a little time. It's a good man, a really good man. And we're going to have to reset America. If we don't reset America, look where we're going. I mean, really and truly. You got crime everywhere, inflation out of control, absolutely. Look where we're going. Wars cropping up all over the world and everything. We've got to reset. Give him a little time. He'll do the right stuff.
What's your message to West Virginians that are waking up and are confused if their kids are going to be able to get free lunch in the next few days?
They're not confused. West Virginians are amazing people, and they get it right. And overwhelmingly, they were really supportive of President Trump. And they know at the end of the day, he'll come through for them, you know, and he will. And I'm absolutely just as confident as all of them are. And so I just think that any business guy, when things are out of control, a business guy's got to say, full stop, let's get it under control. And that's what I think he's doing. You just know this about Donald Trump, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. For what I know of Donald Trump, the things that you miss are just this. He's a tough guy. He's got to be a tough guy. And he's got to make decisions on the fly and absolutely make good decisions. But Donald Trump cares about all of us. He really does. That's the part that people miss, that I really know. I know it in my heart, and that's why I love him, and that's why I support him.
People say that cutting Medicare, cutting Social Security are the only ways that you can really make an impact to our deficit. For you, as somebody who was a governor of a state with people who rely on these benefits, what's your take?
No, I don't believe that. I really don't believe that. I really believe that it's almost impossible to cut your way out of a problem, you know. And sure, we need to look at ridiculous, wasteful spending. We really do. A lot of people, like you say, tons of people, depend on those benefits every day. At the end of the day, I think what has got to happen is just this. We've got to really mind the store as best we possibly can. And I think we'll do that, you know. But as far as making just wholesale cuts, you know, on things that people really, really depend on, I don't think it'll ever happen, you know.
Would you vote against it if it did?
Well, I'd have to see. I mean, I'd have to see what we're doing. Are we eliminating a justifiable waste, or are we really cutting in the bone to just cut in the bone? If we're just cutting in the bone to cut in the bone, I'm not there, you know. But if we're eliminating wasteful just waste, I'm there 100%.
What kind of senator are you going to be? Are you going to vote for everything that Republicans put forward, everything in the Trump agenda, or are you going to evaluate things piece by piece?
No, I'm going to evaluate all the time, you know.
So you're not going to be just a consistent blanket?
I didn't come here just to be a rubber stamp. If you wanted that baby dog, you could just get baby dog to vote all the time. You know, but at the same time, I'm going to be very supportive because my values are conservative values. I mean, they're just good sense, logic values and everything. But I won't be a rubber stamp for anybody.
And NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Tsirkin joins me now, fresh off that exclusive interview. So, Julie, you did talk to the senator about a variety of topics, including some criticism about his attendance record. What did he tell you about that?
Well, he kind of blamed his staff and being a new senator in not knowing that there were votes. The two votes that he missed, Ryan, were a day into his official term as senator on the Laken Riley Act, amending that bill, which, of course, is one of the first pieces of legislation that President Trump has signed into law and will sign into law. But he continued to defend his record, saying that even when he was governor, you know, there were criticisms that he didn't actually come to the Capitol. He didn't live in the governor's mansion. There was a lawsuit filed against him for that. And he said that his job wasn't to get a gold star, as he put it, for perfect attendance. It was to go out there and to talk to people, and that is exactly what he says he's going to do here. By the way, Ryan, he said not only is he interested in serving out his 6-year term, but he said he's interested in potentially serving more, depending on, as he put it, how long the Lord gives him on this earth.
And we saw a little bit of him there. The senator also known to be frequently accompanied by his dog, and apparently he was part of the interview today.
Oh, yeah. Baby dog Justice, 5-year-old bulldog, 62 pounds, sitting on a chair right next to Jim Justice. And I asked him if he's planning on introducing legislation to be able to vote on the Senate floor with that dog. He said there are more important things to worry about. He's not planning on doing it, but he did say it was sort of his bipartisan good luck charm. He said this is really a dog that made everybody smile, black, white, poor, rich, and God forbid, he said, Republican or Democrat, baby dog didn't care. And so I think maybe perhaps a little bit of Joe Manchin coming around with baby dog Justice by his side. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and we had the opportunity to meet Baby Dog a couple weeks ago. I remember he took a real shine to you. So, Julie, that was great that you got to see him again. I'm sure the Baby Dog was thrilled. Thank you, Julie. Still to come, the Trump effect, how the president is already testing the limits of his authority by reshaping the federal government as he meets with House Republicans on the future of his agenda. Our panel is next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Today marks 8 days since President Trump was sworn in for a second term in office. He's already pushed the boundaries of his authority. A sampling so far, President Trump has told the Justice Department not to enforce the law on TikTok. He tried to ban birthright citizenship by executive order. That's been halted by the courts for now. He's fired internal watchdogs without the legally required disclosure to Congress. And he's moving to potentially freeze congressionally appropriated funds if they don't align with his agenda. And if you're keeping score, it's only day 8. Joining me now on set is Chris Cillizza, the founder of the So What newsletter and a senior advisor at Denton's Global Advisors and a former colleague of mine. Maria Teresa Kumar, president and CEO of Voto Latino. She's also an NBC News contributor. And the pride of New York Mills, New York, Rob Bluey, the president and executive editor of the Daily Signal. Rob and I both share a connection to Central New York. So, Rob, great to have you at the table. Chris, but let me start with you.
Sure.
8 days since Trump was sworn in. We've seen an expansion of this executive authority. Is this what voters asked for when they elected him?
I think so. I mean, that may be an unpopular opinion, but yeah, I mean, look, the thing I always say about Donald Trump is you can say many things about him, and candidly, I've said many things about him, but what I will say is he isn't someone who hides the ball. Mm-hmm. Like in the campaign, it's not like he campaigned like he was going to govern like Mitt Romney. You know what I mean? Like, he made quite clear hardline stances on immigration. We're going to get rid of or purge the federal workforce. Now, did he campaign on every single one of these things? No, I don't think so. I guess I would answer your question. Tonally, this is sort of what people voted for. I think, I don't know that Donald Trump thinks that birthright citizenship is going to hold up. Candidly, I don't. It's in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of hard to just kind of change that. I hope it's hard to change that. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of it is tonal. A lot of it is, you heard from Jim Justice in that interview, he's tough.
Right.
And I think that's what he campaigned on. And this is how he envisions toughness and shaking things up, playing out when you're in charge of the federal government.
So, Rob, I want to put up what the number 3 House Republican Tom Emmer said about this OMB memo, and it kind of echoes a little bit of what Chris is saying. Trump is doing exactly what he was elected to do. You need to understand he was elected to shake up the status quo. I mean, you look at some of the organizations, though, that were impacted by this freeze. You have Elon Musk telling a crowd at Madison Square Garden, we're going to cut $2 trillion. You can't cut $2 trillion if you're not touching some of these things that people rely on and care about. Do you think the voters equate the promise of big cuts to the actual programs that could impact them directly?
Ryan, you know as well as I do that any time in Washington there's special interests and groups that are going to try to protect their piece of the budget. And so one way to do this is what Donald Trump did today, and that is to say we're going to put a freeze on this $3 trillion in spending. We're going to take a careful look at how that money is being appropriated, and then let's figure out what exactly we're going to do with it. And so, yes, I do think that there was warning. When one of those reporters asked Caroline Leavitt in the briefing today, what warning did you give? The warning, as Chris indicated, was the entire campaign and the transition period in which Donald Trump said he was going to come in there and shake things up and not do things as the status quo.
But is that the way you're supposed to do it? You don't govern by executive order necessarily. If you want to fix the budget, you work with Congress, you pass a budget, you make those cuts during that process. Do you do it this way with just a blanket freeze and then try and do it by executive order?
We know that Congress is not able to pass a budget. Look at, we've been having continuing resolution after continuing resolution. Even the promises that Speaker Johnson has made haven't been able to materialize because the appropriations bills, the 12 appropriations bills, don't ever come to the floor for an individual vote. And so I think Donald Trump is sensing the frustration that the American people have, and he is going to shake things up and do things differently.
I take Rob's point covering Capitol Hill and many continuing resolutions, Maria, but the Constitution doesn't offer that caveat, right? Even if Congress can't pass 12 appropriations bills, you don't just get to go in and decide that you want to not spend certain programs or not. So go ahead.
I think the way you're framing it is absolutely right. I think that we need to all take a beat and actually say out loud what we're witnessing. Mm-hmm. What Trump is doing right now is he is reimagining appropriations. He is centralizing power into the executive branch in ways that we've never seen before. In a former life, I used to work on appropriations as a former staffer. I intimately understand the negotiation that takes place within Congress, within the Senate, and ultimately within the White House. So this idea that he is putting a freeze on it is going to have major implications. We're seeing him reimagine government in 2 ways. One, by freezing the hiring of federal workers, and basically he's laying off civil servants to point to put his political appointees, that isn't small. He's saying, I want everybody in the agency to fall in line with my agenda. That's number one. Number two, he is now literally negotiating with Congress saying, you know what, I have the power of the purse, not you. That is against the Constitution, and the courts will decide. But in the meantime, this idea that he is going to decide who gets money and who doesn't, if you're living in a small state that didn't vote for him, good luck to you. Yeah. Because he is signaling right now is that he is going to align his dollars with the person who put him in office. And that is not what the person at the White House is supposed to do. They're supposed to be the leader for all of Americans.
But wait a second, that's exactly what Joe Biden did with giving money to non-government organizations to carry out the resettling of illegal immigrants all across this country. Catholic Charities.
Come on, I think that if we're talking about what Biden did, he put major infrastructure in red states because he recognized that they actually needed to level up. When you talked about putting internet connection, it was in rural America. What we are seeing right now is a real imagining of the American people. What folks don't know is today, when he decided that he was going to freeze federal spending, OMB now, families cannot access their Medicaid payments. Medicaid is delivered, and I learned this today, Medicaid is delivered daily. Right. So imagine all of a sudden you go to the government portal, to your state portal, and you can access a Medicaid payment.
We're still trying to figure out the impacts of this. But, Chris, I want to play an exchange that our Vaughn Hilliard had with the Oversight Chair, James Comer, there at the Republican retreat in Florida. Take a listen.
What assurance can you give them, those American families, that this is not going to immediately impact them?
I mean, I've always been an advocate I was the sponsor of legislation that kept school lunches going during COVID.
Can you assure them this pause will not be long-term?
Well, I can assure them that we're going to try to get the money that they're supposed to get to them. We're going to try to stop the waste, fraud, and abuse. But at the end of the day, there's wasteful spending, there's bureaucracies that are out of control, and I think that's what Trump's trying to rein in. I support that.
I've covered 2 state houses. Now I've covered Congress close to 10 years. Waste, fraud, and abuse has never balanced a budget in the entire time that I've been covering legislatures. But to this point, Chris, it seems as though even members of Congress were caught off guard by this. They can't answer simple questions. I mean, should what Comer said reassure someone that might be worried about their funding?
I mean, it wouldn't reassure me necessarily. I mean, it seems to me that, and again, I guess I'm not surprised by this in that Donald Trump, I think Maria Teresa is right. Like, you can say whatever you will about him, but he's clearly working to consolidate as much power in the executive branch as possible. Now, so did George Bush, so did Barack Obama, so did Joe Biden, but not at this level this fast, right? Both of those things I think are true. So, look, Congress has been rolled a little bit. I mean, this is a nerdy point, but I know you will appreciate it. The Speaker of the House, this is a week ago, the Speaker of the House saying, oh, you know what, the guy who's in charge of the Ethics Committee, he's not in charge of it anymore because Donald Trump doesn't like him. We're going to put a guy who likes Donald Trump in charge. Intelligence Committee, rather, not ethics, right. Intelligence. I mean, it's a little thing that I know the average American isn't like, oh, my gosh, the Intelligence Committee chairman changing. But it speaks to the passivity of Donald Trump acts and everyone else, including James Comer and everybody else in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, candidly, reacts at this point.
And Rob, should they be pushing back more on Donald Trump, even though he won the election? Is it responsible for the Speaker of the House to allow the president to pick the chair of the Intel Committee?
Congress is obviously going to exert its own authority at the end of the day, but Donald Trump will have a big say in that. I mean, obviously, he had a big say in who the next speaker was. And when he got behind Mike Johnson, I think that consolidated a lot of Republicans in his camp. I will say this, though, to your point. Republicans in the last hour or so, and this is the new Trump rapid response unit that they've stood up within the last week, are pushing back aggressively on Democrats about some of the information they're pushing out, specifically as it relates to student loans and food stamps and Medicaid. And so we will see from a communication standpoint, yes, Medicare and Social Security, I mean, they've mentioned all of them. Yep. We will see how this plays out because, remember, effectively during the campaign, Trump used that rapid response tool to really clobber Kamala Harris repeatedly, and that was an effective tool in his toolbox.
And so, Maria, finally for you, I mean, Democrats are a bit in the wilderness right now. They don't have an election now for almost 2 years. Yep. Is it just a bully pulpit? I mean, how do they effectively fight back against something that they find to be really problematic at this point?
Well, I think that one is they need a mechanism of communication, but they also have to make sure that they don't vote on his agenda, that if it's going to be adverse and it's going to harm the American people, while they do not have a majority, they do have avenues where they could actually negotiate, and that's what they're going to have to do. And I have to say that the last 3 months, the Democrats have been absent. You haven't heard from them.
Right.
And that actually, I think, is hurting them more than actually giving opposition.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Great conversation, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Chris, Maria, Teresa, Rob, thank you all. We're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. But right now, we're going to go to Hallie Jackson, and the news continues with her on NBC News Now. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.